Welcome to this podcast. My name is Paul. I'm in Peterhead in Scotland, a recovered addict. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Anthony.
My name's Anthony, and I'm in the southwest, and I am a recovered drug addict.
Lovely stuff. Today we are in the 10th tradition. I'm really pleased to be here as always. Check out the other podcasts on the channel. If you're new to recovery or still using alcohol or other drugs, there's lots of resources available. We've got lots of things we can send you on WhatsApp. We've got PDFs of our basic text, Alcoholics Anonymous, often called the Big Book. And indeed, the book we'll have on the screen shortly on this podcast, the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. We've also got PDFs of Quiet Peace, Hope, Faith and Courage, and various other wonderful sobriety books. There'll also be information about meetings, how you can get to face-to-face and online meetings later in the podcast. So please come along to meetings, reach out. We also have sponsorship lists if anyone's looking for sponsorship. So stay connected. Bear in mind, you can rewind, pause, fast forward this podcast. You can share it with others. You can like and subscribe. As always, we'll just be giving a brief accounting of this tradition. You could always say more about these things, they're broad and roomy as the steps are. And, the traditions are for the health and well-being of the group, and the steps are for the health and well-being of the individual. So somewhere here, Anthony, by a miracle of test once again, so just bear with me. I think with that you can only have one thing open at a time with the Adobe Reader. So thanks for joining us. Like I say, do check out the other podcasts. There we go.
And the tradition we are going to be looking at today is Tradition 10, Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name will never be drawn into public controversy.
Yes, we've got some great pictures here. Let's have a look here. So there's a chap at the podium. Now in America, AA meetings and CA meetings and NA meetings are often held in a hall where the speaker goes and stands at the front, Anthony. We don't have that as much in Britain, do we? We quite standing at a podium. But anyway, here's an illustration of a chap at a podium, glad of his sobriety. And then he's like, but before I go, I've got to tell you about the political situation and I've got to give my opinions on politics. And then everyone starts arguing then. And then here's a chap at the bottom who says, oh, I don't like this at all. How can anyone stay sober when they've got all this carry on? Are you still there, Anthony?
Yep, I am.
Yeah, that's it. We simply have the picture for this one. There isn't any writing, so we'll just go straight.
I not expressing opinions on the outside issues. The 12-step groups hope to avoid controversy, both publicly and within the fellowship itself. This policy also helps members keep the focus. It helps us keep our focus on our common purpose, which is we're here to serve, not cause controversy and have opinions on outside issues.
Yes, absolutely. We have a primary purpose. They all tie in together, the traditions, don't they? We think of tradition 5, each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the addict who still suffers. And shoemaker, stick to your last. Our primary purpose is to stay clean and sober and help others to stay clean and sober, isn't it? We're not here to give our opinion.
So, likewise, AACA, we shouldn't be lending our name to outside organisations such as professional treatment facilities. You might see advertisements for treatment programs that claim to be 12-step based, but you won't see any that say they are affiliated with Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Primary purpose, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, I'm just getting it up on the screen. Anthony, just give me one moment. There we go. Right. Shall we do roughly a page each? So this is tradition 10 out of the 12 steps and 12 traditions.
Yeah. You want me to start us off?
Yeah.
Okay, tradition 10. Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. Hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. Never since it began has Alcoholics Anonymous been divided by a major controversial issue, nor has our fellowship ever publicly taken sides on any question in any embattled world. This, however, has been no earned virtue. It could almost be said that we were born with it. For, as one old-timer recently declared, practically never have I heard a heated religious, political, or reform argument among AA members. So long as we don't argue these matters privately, it is a cinch we never shall publicly. As by some deep instinct, we AAs have known from the very beginning that we must never, no matter what the provocation, publicly take sides in any fight, even a worthy one. All history affords us the spectacle of striving nations and groups finally torn asunder because they were designed for or tempted into controversy. Others fell apart because of sheer self-righteousness, while trying to enforce upon the rest of mankind some millennium of their own pacific specification. In our own times, we have seen millions die in political and economic wars, often spurred by religious and racial difference. We live in an imminent possibility of fresh holocaust to determine how men shall be governed and how the products of nature and toil shall be divided among them. This is a spiritual climate in which AA was born and by God's grace has nevertheless flourished.
Let us re-emphasize that this reluctance to fight one another or anybody else is not counted as some special virtue which makes us feel superior to other people, nor does it mean that the members of Alcoholics Anonymous, now restored as citizens of the world, are going to back away from their individual responsibilities to act as they see the right upon issues of our time. But when it comes to AA as a whole, that's quite a different matter. In this respect, we do not enter into public controversy because we know that our society will perish if it does. We conceive the survival and spread of Alcoholics Anonymous to be something of far greater importance than the weight we could collectively throw back of any other cause. Since recovery from alcoholism is life itself to us, it is imperative that we preserve in full strength our means of survival. Maybe this sounds as though the alcoholics in AA had suddenly gone peaceable and become one great big happy family. Of course, this isn't so at all. Human beings that we are, we squabble. Before we levelled off a bit, AA looked more like one prodigious squabble than anything else, at least upon the surface. A corporation director who had just voted a company expenditure of $100,000 would appear at an AA business meeting and blow his top over an outlay of $25 worth of needed postage stamps. Disliking the attempt of some to manage a group, half its membership might angrily rush off to form another group more to their liking. Elders, temporarily turned Pharisee, have sulked. Bitter attacks have been directed against people suspected of mixed motives. Despite their din, our puny rows never did a particle of harm. They were just part and parcel of learning to work and live together. Let it be noted too that they were almost always concerned with ways to make AA more effective, how to do the most good for the most alcoholics.
The Washingtonian Society, a movement among alcoholics which started in Baltimore a century ago, almost discovered the answer to alcoholism. At first, the society was composed entirely of alcoholics trying to help one another. The early members foresaw that they should dedicate themselves to this sole aim. In many respects, the Washingtonians were akin to AA of today. Their membership passed the 100,000 mark. Had they been left to themselves, and had they stuck to their one goal, they might have found the rest of the answer. But this didn't happen. Instead, the Washingtonians permitted politicians and reformers, both alcoholics and non-alcoholics, to use the society for their own purposes. Abolition of slavery, for example, was a stormy political issue then. Soon Washingtonian speakers violently and publicly took sides on this question. Maybe the society could have survived the abolition controversy, but it didn't have a chance from the moment it determined to reform. America's drinking habits, when the Washingtonians became temperance crusaders, within a very few years, they had completely lost their effectiveness in helping alcoholics. The lesson to be learned from the Washingtonians was not overlooked by Alcoholics Anonymous. As we survived the wreck of this movement, early AA members resolved to keep our society out of public controversy. This was laid the cornerstone of Tradition 10. Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy.
Lovely, beautifully read, Anthony. That was great. Yeah, so I think this one's a very important tradition, and over the years, Anthony, I've seen people come into meetings and they're obsessed about their peculiar opinions of themselves and what they do behind closed doors, and they've sought to cause other members to have a position, with not to get into having opinions on outside issues, but just in general terms, Anthony, persons do come to meetings nowadays and they feel that their particular opinion of their own, what they do behind closed doors, and their own opinion of themselves ought to amend how you and I speak and think, and obviously that's not right. We do have free speech. This tradition doesn't say that you and me as individuals can't have opinions and views on world affairs. We wouldn't be responsible citizens if we didn't. However, when it comes to the groups and meetings, we have these traditions in place for the safe place for people to find and develop and establish sobriety.
Yep, I wholeheartedly agree with you. If Alcoholics Anonymous could do nothing but die if this tradition weren't put in place, really, or AA, the fellowship, officially held opinions on various issues outside the program, they could serve to alienate members with disregard. So they had to learn from the Washingtonians. A wise man will learn by his mistakes, but a clever man will learn by the other man's mistakes. And I think that's what they put there. They kind of didn't want to make the same mistake as what them Washingtonians made. And I've heard many misinformed folks refer to AA as a cult. If not for Tradition 10, it could develop into that with a policy set and the rest of us expected, to mentally follow. We would be like a political party. We can't have that. I believe this tradition is important for individual AA members as well, as we see on the illustration there. Sometimes opinions or treatment centre jargon gets passed on as AA law. Things like anyone who smokes cigarettes isn't really sober, or when we attempt to be untrained medical doctors dealing with other members' health and medical issues. I even read in the most recent, this is about a member whose sponsor told her she had to take a new sobriety date because she had surgery and had to have pain medication. These sorts of opinions can get passed on to newcomers like important parts of the program, when in fact they are outside issues. I feel that it is important for me to keep Tradition 10 in mind when I share in meetings. You know, the man or the woman with the least knowledge of what this program is about is, after all, you know, the most important person in the room. So this is, you know, where our common purpose is. The common welfare should come first, right? You know, and the Tradition 10, you know, in theory, it's a wonderful tradition. In reality, there are many controversial issues and opinions that Alcoholics Anonymous World Service included, you know, becomes involved in. As an old saying goes, but not making a decision, by not making a decision, you're making a decision. The same goes for not having an opinion, you know. By not taking sides in theory, AA cannot put itself in a position other than that of neutrality. When neutral, there is no right or wrong. There is, you know, there's no chance of problems diverting AA from the primary purpose. It's, you know, Cocaine Anonymous from our primary purpose of helping other addicts and alcoholics recover, you know, if the alcoholic desires to do so. So this tradition is also some sort of, it's an oxymoron, really. You know, take 10 alcoholics and ask their opinions, you will probably get at least 12 opinions. All alcoholics have opinions, most of them strong ones. Controversy is what makes AA grow and prosper in a spiritual sense. So it's been that way ever since AA began. All one needs to start a meeting is a resentment and a coffee pot. You know, so the AA fellowship, you know, it goes into a public courts, litigating to protect property. By doing so, it violates the confidentiality and anonymity of the individual AA members and invites public controversy. You know, so there's different scenarios where we've got to stay out of that and stay neutral, you know, and our primary purpose is what we do here. And there's one ultimate authority, a loving God is, he may express himself in our group conscience, you know. And that's what we got to keep and know. These are guidelines that we need to stick to keep the infrastructure. It clearly tells us there that, you know, this is a God-given program and we're here to serve and not be served. Over to you, Paul.
Yeah, and I think it's very important, you know, for groups, you know, not to have opinion on outside issues. Some of the other topical things, you know, that I've experienced over the last year or two, Anthony, is people will often come to me and say, "Oh, this group does this, or that group does this, or what do you think about this group doing that?" Well, as a group, we've no opinion. They're all outside issues. You know, it doesn't matter if it's a conglomerate of 1,000 groups that does or thinks or says do or something or votes something. That's irrelevant. Each group is fully autonomous. So if a member comes to a group and says, "Oh, well, this group says this," well, it's an outside issue. We wish them well, but it has zero, nada bearing on an individual group. Each group is completely autonomous. You know, and similarly, you'll get, you know, folks coming to meetings. Well, this member of this group says this, or they're doing that. Well, that's their business. We wish them well, but it is an outside issue. You know, there's 1,001 outside issues. You mentioned medication. We're not doctors. You know, unless someone's slurring on a step work call or raises the topic themselves, it's really none of my business what arrangement they have with a medical practitioner. That is an outside issue. You know, and then also this tradition as well, it has, of course, the wider thought of political and cultural goings on. You know, we're not going to be drawn into public controversy. Folk out there are not going to be able to say, "Oh, well, you know, AOC or NA has an opinion." You know, we're not going to be drawn into controversy. So I really like the tradition. I think it's really, really important. You know, and I think you said, I think it's all been said, really, Anthony. You know, we've got to keep it simple. Primary purpose is to carry the message of sobriety, of hope, faith, and courage to the still suffering alcoholic, and to help each other stay clean and sober. You know, and it's a very pure thing. I think you know, these traditions, they stop men sticking a spanner in the works. That's what these traditions do. We in tradition 7, we're fully self-supporting. In tradition 4, we're completely autonomous. We've just been looking at tradition 9, which has to do with not being organised. And tradition 10 has to do with opinions. So we have money, control, and words dealt with in these traditions. In tradition 7, it's money. We're fully self-supporting. In tradition 9, it's control. We're not organised. In tradition 10, it's opinions. You know, we watch what we restrain to pen and tongue. You know, set a guard at the door of my lips. You know, we have to be wise what we say. You know, what we say can cause trouble, and we mustn't be persons that cause trouble. You know, so with no opinion on outside issues. And I like the reading as well, Anthony, and that I've learned what it talks about further on in the reading there about sticking to their one goal. And what was the other thing? Oh, yes, the Washingtonians, you mentioned it. As with many, many, many groups down the centuries, you know, wherever money, prestige, getting diverted from the primary purpose comes in, it's been the end of a lot of spiritual movements down the centuries. You know, you and me could talk all morning, Anthony, on all different kinds of spiritual groups that started out great and ended up distracted and divided. Why? Money, control, prestige, and opinion. That's why. Good food, help others, go on quietly, and let God do his work. That's what I have to say. What do you think, Anthony, in closing? What's your thoughts?
Yep, I believe that if we follow these traditions and we let God do the rest, as you said, you know, we can't get diverted from our primary purpose. And this is why tradition 10, you know, it falls right into place where it's placed, you know, and we shouldn't be having an opinion on outside issues. We're only here. Our common purpose, our primary purpose is to serve, you know, the still suffering drug addict or alcoholic. You know, we don't have no opinions on outside issues. We're part of a fellowship. Keep it, you know?
Well, that's right. And I think as well, Anthony, you know, it's very important that groups have a spiritual atmosphere that's conducive to sobriety. The problem is the mind of man. When men start getting too active with opinions and perspectives and things like this, it can stop the Spirit of God. It stops God doing, or it can hinder God doing his work. You know, and it's a spiritual message. It's the language of the heart that we carry in our meetings. You know, it's not intellectual dogma. That's the other point that I wanted to just briefly mention. In the reading, Anthony, it talked about how members don't get into it even outside of meetings. You know, and it kind of made the point that if members don't get into debating politics and societal and political currents, as it were, then they're unlikely to get into it in the meetings. And I just thought it was a precious thing to think of cohesion and unity by not only do we not get into it as a group or in the group, but outside of the group. We just, you know, we try and live on a spiritual basis. We keep things in our own hula hoop. You know, we get a new pair of glasses in AA, we get an attitude adjustment, and we can keep things very simple. And maintain that conscious contact, you know, and get the eye salve of the Holy Spirit, the ointment of the Spirit, and our perceptions change, don't they? You know, we don't need to be crusaders or tub thumpers. You know, you sometimes go to meetings and there's tub thumpers, you know, and here he is again. You know, he's be thumping his tub. We need a spiritual message from God's heart, you know, and the group is supposed to be there for God to do his work sovereignly, you know, and the natural mind can come in. And as I've already mentioned, where opinions come in, prestige and control and money, these things can quickly go wrong. And the last point I would make is, you know, sometimes persons and groups that are not rightly related towards God in their personal lives, they look for self-righteousness in other areas. They can look for identity, for example, in coming up with loads and do's and don'ts, loads of guidelines. As I indicated, I was part of a group 15 plus years ago, and that's what we did. You know, and the group can almost be looking for identity and prominence through loads of do's and don'ts and rules and regulations, like a legalistic right standing. When really, if you rightly relate with God and your eyes get open to God's work and God's heart and God's mind, Anthony, you have a spiritual disposition and you can trust in God, rather than trust in mankind. What do you think?
I wholeheartedly agree with you. It is about trusting in infinite God and not our finite selves. And as you said, the spirit, it is a spiritual message. And the way these principles, they're spiritual principles that were put in place for a reason, to make sure that we keep, it's the spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection, but we keep thriving towards God's will, and let him do his work, and we're only here, to serve, aren't we?
Yeah.
Like the Lord come to serve and not be served, and we can't have opinions on outside issues, and we can't, we got to keep it structured for the equality, and making sure that we're here to serve. You know what? And
Yes, that's right.
that's
right.
it. Really.
That's right. And the drunkenness of the world mustn't affect the sobriety of AA or CA or any. Let's face it, Anthony, the world's going mad out there. You know what I mean? I'm not going to break the tradition by diverting the conversation to this, but the world is quite mad. I don't know if you read the news, the things that go on, the nations and in the news, and terrible things that happen. The drunkenness of the world must not affect the sobriety of AA, CA, and NA. It mustn't. We as a group maintain our group sobriety in order to maintain our individual sobriety. It has to be something of a refuge. The group is a safe place. It has to be a refuge of peace and harmony and well-being as best as can be maintained. And I think being clear of financial motives and prestige and control and restraint of pen and tongue are vital to the promotion of personal or group and personal sobriety. Now, that does bring us to the end of today's podcast. Like I said, there's lots and lots of meetings where you can go and hear a message of hope, faith, courage, and freedom, and find a new way of life, a lifestyle change, an attitude adjustment. So, if you're new or you're still drinking and drugging, have a think about sobriety. You can make yourself a consequences list. You can share about your desire to get and stay clean and sober. As I say, there's sponsorship available. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat beneath this podcast. On the screen right now, you can pause this or take a screenshot. Is information about Zoom meetings. If you're in Britain, the web address at the top of the page there, cocaineanonymous.org.uk, is where you can find out about lots of in-person meetings in Britain and upcoming conventions and other events in the UK, and online meetings. On the screen, these are just some of the online meetings that are available. In the middle is the New Zealand Marathon there. That's a phenomenal 24-hour meeting that's permanently on, a very healthy meeting. It's permanently on. And there's another one there, the 319 Marathon. That's always on as well. It's a very good meeting too. So there's loads of great meetings, so you can stay connected and learn how to live clean and sober. So without further ado, I just want to thank my good friend Anthony for his time this morning, coming along to carry a message of hope. So appreciate you, Anthony.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you for inviting me as always. It's always nice, be a small part of a big whole, and as a member of Cocaine Anonymous.
Absolutely. Beautiful. So stay strong, stay safe, family in the solution, and we'll be back soon with another podcast.